In this second Great Brexit Debate video, I'm exploring how the European Union actually works. Why was it set up? What's the long-term objective of the EU? What do each of the institutions, the Council, the Parliament and the Commission do? How does the EU make laws? Because unless we understand how it works, how can we actually decide if it's something we want to be part of or not? Last week I went to see a man who has plenty of experience in how the EU works. Roger Helmer, following a long and successful business career, became a member of the European Parliament for the East Midlands 17 years ago. I started by asking Roger how the European Union came about. It was initially conceived in the 40s and 50s, really, wasn't it?
Yes, well, they were dreaming of it, I think, in the 20s and 30s, but the actual practical action started after the war with an honourable objective, and the honourable objective was to make sure that we never had another destructive European war like the two we had in the early part of the 20th century, and the formation of the coal and steel community, because coal and steel were the sinews of war, if you like.
Right.
And if those were jointly owned and jointly controlled, it would be impossible for one country to make war on another.
So, if you want to go to war, you need steel and coal or some other form of energy to build your ships and tanks and weapons, etc. So the idea was to prevent France and Germany in particular going to war with each other in the future by having joint ownership over these resources. Kind of makes sense. I went on to ask Roger what the objectives of those people who conceived this first union of European nations were.
The dreamers of the time, like Jean Monnet, they had a clear objective of creating something like a United States of Europe.
Right.
And some of the quotes, well-authenticated quotes from Jean Monnet, for example, said, "It would be impossible to sell that to the people today. What we must present it as is merely an economic opportunity. It's about trade, it's about jobs, and that way the people will come along with us."
So, it's very clear from the research I've done and from what Roger says that the European Union was conceived with the idea of eventually creating a European state. But I think it's only gradually become clear to people in Britain over the last few decades that this is still the central objective, and that there's been a very deliberate attempt to conceal this. In 1975, we had the last referendum in Britain. Many people of the older generations who voted back then are today very resentful that they were misled about what was happening. It wasn't simply about trade as they were told, but was in fact the first step in drawing Britain into a European superstate. To understand how the European Union achieved this, we need to look at how the institutions of the EU operate. Roger explains how they differ from our own expectations of how we might expect things to work.
The people we elect, the MEPs, do not form a government. The Commission, which is appointed, not elected, is in control of the whole process, and in particular is responsible for drafting new legislative proposals. The Parliament will debate those and can vote amendments to them. Even when it's voted the amendments, those go back to the Commission and the Council, which is the representatives of the member states, and basically they sit in a room and the first one that blinks is lost. It's that sort of deal. So it's a very complicated process, very difficult to understand. Much of the law, the legislative proposals, are drafted by effectively secret committees of specialists who have considerable influence on the process. And then again, you've got 10,000 or so lobbyists who are knocking on the doors of the Commission and the Council and the Parliament, seeking to influence the process. So it's a very complicated, very obscure process. And frankly, it lacks any kind of realistic democratic accountability.
So how are laws, or legislation, just another word for lawmaking, actually made? Well, as Roger explained, the EU Commission is the really powerful body. They draft and introduce all the laws, and they have around 30,000 people working at the Commission. The European Parliament has no power at all to introduce law. It can only vote to amend, or in extreme cases, reject legislation. The European Council can't legislate either. All it can do is ask the Commission to bring forward proposals on particular issues and define general political directions. You'd probably expect a Parliament to make laws, but they don't. There are no manifestos or list of proposals presented to the people to vote on, and even if there was, the Parliament would not be able to introduce legislation to make them happen. Some people think that the EU Commission is a non-political body, a bit like civil servants, but in reality, The appointed commissioners tend to, in fact, be politicians, like, for example, Neil Kinnock, who the British people specifically voted not to elect as Prime Minister in 1992, but who was nevertheless appointed as an EU Commissioner and served for 9.5 years in a role making laws in Europe which we have to abide by. While researching this issue and coming to the surprising conclusions that I have come to, I came across a video produced by the European Union itself. As you'll see in a moment, it completely overcomes any idea that the powerful EU Commission are merely civil servants or administrators.
The Commission is a group of politicians, men and women, who meet every Wednesday in Brussels. We call them commissioners. Together they form the government of Europe, so to speak.
As it says, the EU Commission is the government of Europe, so to speak. But just listen to this next piece.
They all have their own specific field of responsibilities and come from different countries. It is their role to defend the general interest of the European Union. When they take their oaths, they swear not to accept instructions from their own government.
Well, that is a bit of a revelation, isn't it? The EU Commissioners actually sign an oath, committing not to take instructions from their own democratically elected government, whose job it is to represent us. I guess that says it all. In the next video, I'll be exploring the question of whether or not the EU can ever become an organisation capable of representing us democratically. If you'd like to watch future videos, please like our Facebook page or subscribe to our YouTube channel, and also please remember to share this video with your friends. Many thanks.